It was 11:51 at night when my phone screen lit up, cutting through the darkness like a knife. The message was from my mother, Patricia, and it was brutally simple. We've made our decision. You're not family anymore. Stay away from all family events. There was no phone call beforehand, no warning, just a cold digital dismissal. Seconds after that, my sister Brianna reacted to the message with a heart, like cutting me out was something to celebrate together. I didn't break down crying, didn't beg them to explain. Instead, I grabbed my laptop, opened every account where I'd been paying their bills, and methodically started canceling everything. By 12:03 in the morning, their comfortable life began to crumble in the darkness. But before I go any further with what happened after that moment, let me ask you something. Where are you hearing this story from right now? I need to know I'm not the only person who's ever had to shut off the power on their own family. When I closed my laptop and the screen went black, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than all the noise from the city streets below. The refrigerator's hum, the faint ticking from the clock on my wall, everything sounded like witnesses to what I'd just done. I sat there with my hand still resting on the keyboard, my heartbeat strangely calm in a way that actually frightened me. This anger I felt wasn't the screaming kind. It was cold and methodical. For so many years, I'd been quietly funding their entire lifestyle, the mortgage that somehow never went into default, even though my name wasn't on it, the car insurance that mysteriously renewed itself every 6 months, my bank account, every overdue bill, every financial crisis, every tearful phone call that started with the words, "We just need a bit of help this month." I'd taken care of all of it. I convinced myself it was what family does, that it was my duty, the morally right choice. Looking back now, I realize it had just been a subscription service where I was the one stuck with the bill. I looked around at my apartment then. Everything was organized, labeled, arranged by color. It was how I coped with stress. After growing up in complete chaos, I'd constructed this ordered world out of all that noise. But that night, all that order felt like it was working against me. Every carefully filed receipt, every auto payment I'd set up, it all felt like documentation of my own foolishness. I used to believe love meant enduring things, that if I just stayed quiet and kept giving without complaint, eventually they'd realize I was worth keeping around. My mother Patricia had fed me guilt my entire childhood like it was a staple food, small servings given frequently. My sister Brianna was the favorite, the golden child who was loud and charming and never faced any real consequences for anything. Dad, whose name is Richard, he'd learned to survive by just staying out of the line of fire. I'd learned survival meant making sure there was never any fire to begin with. I still remember the very first time I paid their property taxes for them. They were about to lose the house, their voices breaking with panic over the phone. I was 26 years old, barely managing my own rent, but I transferred that money without even thinking twice. Mom called me her guardian angel after that. I actually believed her. Then came the utility bills, the car payments, Brianna's college tuition, which cost $18,000 every single year for 3 straight years. It's funny how guardian angels always seem to end up paying the bills in hell. I rubbed my tired eyes, trying to force myself to feel some regret, but all I found was clarity. This wasn't a mental breakdown I was having. It was more like reviewing a balance sheet. I wasn't losing my family. I was simply collecting evidence. The last time I'd actually seen them face to face was at Sunday dinner about 6 months earlier. Mom had corrected my posture in front of everyone at the table. Brianna had gone on and on bragging about some upcoming business trip that I knew for a fact was really just a week-long beach vacation. Dad had cracked a joke about how I was too uptight and serious to ever keep a man interested. I'd smiled through the mashed potatoes and swallowed down the truth. That dinner table had been a courtroom all along. I just hadn't realized I was the defendant on trial. Now, sitting in the soft glow of my laptop screen, I opened a fresh spreadsheet. Date, dollar amount, what it was for, and proof. My fingers moved across the keyboard like they already knew exactly what to do. One column at a time, I was taking back years and years of respect that had never been paid to me. Outside my window, the city lights blinked through the glass like some kind of Morse code. Somewhere out there in that city, my family was sleeping peacefully, convinced I'd finally accepted being cut off. They had absolutely no clue I was just getting started. By the time morning came around, my phone looked like a museum display of missed calls. Richard, Patricia, Brianna, each name glowing on the screen like artifacts from something that used to have meaning. I didn't pick up a single one of those calls. The silence growing between us had real weight now. It was evidence. The first message that actually came through wasn't even from my mother. It was Brianna. "You're totally overreacting. Mom didn't really mean it like that. Can we just have a conversation?" Talk. Like that word hadn't been poisoned years and years ago. I read it once, then read it again, and suddenly noticed there wasn't one single apology anywhere in those sentences, just attempts at control disguised as concern. I deleted the message and returned to my spreadsheet. Every single line I filled in was another memory being converted into mathematics. The exact date I'd covered Brianna's tuition payment. The overdraft charges from when Richard borrowed my debit card to buy gas. The month I'd actually skipped paying my own rent so I could cover their property taxes. Every single dollar had a story attached to it, and every story ended exactly the same way, with me cleaning up the mess they'd made. At 9 in the morning, Patricia finally sent an email. No greeting line, no apology, just this. "We need to discuss what you've done. You've created a huge mess. Call us right now." Not one word acknowledging what she'd said to me the night before. No mention whatsoever of the exile, just orders to get back into my role. The fixer, the buffer, the peacekeeper. For the very first time, I saw it with perfect clarity. The family I thought I was rescuing had never actually wanted to be rescued. What they wanted was an assistant. I typed back this response. "I'm currently busy reconciling my accounts. You should probably do the same." Then I clicked send. The phone started ringing immediately. I let it buzz and vibrate until it finally stopped. By noon that day, I could see the panic starting to spread through their messages. A text from Richard. "Can you please tell us what's happening with the utility bills? Your mother is absolutely losing her mind." Another message from Brianna. "Why would you do this? You're destroying everything." Destroying everything. As if my silence was the actual crime here, not the fact that they'd betrayed me. I opened my banking application, scrolled back through years and years of transactions, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The guilt that had been carved into my bones like a tattoo was starting to fade away. This wasn't anger anymore. It was precision, cold and deliberate and focused. By 3 that afternoon, they'd tried every manipulation tactic they knew. Anger, begging, appeals to nostalgia. Patricia even made a vague post on Facebook. Some people forget who raised them once they start earning decent money. Pride always comes before the fall. It got about 3 dozen likes, mostly from relatives who hadn't bothered speaking to me in years. I didn't respond to any of it, but I did save a screenshot of that post. That was the exact moment when the scales finally tipped, not just in the financial accounts, but inside me personally. For the first time in my life, I understood that silence could actually be a strategy. At 6 that evening, I called Emily Chen. She'd been my closest friend since our college days, and now she was a family law attorney who specialized in complicated inheritance disputes. "I think I'm ready to stop playing accountant for them," I told her. She didn't ask me for any details, just said this. "Then you need to start documenting absolutely everything. We'll make this official." That night, I went through every single email, every payment record, every bank transfer, labeling everything and archiving it all like courtroom evidence. The more I organized, the lighter I started to feel. By midnight, my email inbox looked like preparation. For a trial. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the one being accused. By the second night, the quiet had developed its own rhythm, the kind that happens right before a major storm finally breaks. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness. Every browser tab was a doorway leading back into years of gratitude that was never repaid. Mortgage payments, insurance premiums, tuition costs, tax bills. They'd constructed their comfortable life on top of my silence, and I was finished paying for their peace of mind. At 11:00 that night, Emily called me. Is everything ready on your end? Every single receipt, I told her. Every transfer recorded. Good, she said. Then you're not asking them for repayment, Madison. You're enforcing it. She walked me through exactly what to write. A formal legal notice. Calm, purely factual, absolutely lethal. The subject line read, Outstanding balances, foster family account. The body of the email said this. This correspondence serves as formal notification of reimbursement owed. You have 30 days to begin a repayment plan before legal proceedings are initiated. No emotional language, no threats, just truth presented in business terminology. When I clicked send, the silence that came after wasn't empty at all. It was alive with possibility. 12 minutes later, the first responses started flooding in. From Richard, let's just be reasonable about this. From Patricia, how could you possibly do this to your own parents? From Brianna, you're completely insane. You're tearing this family apart. I stared at their words with a steady, detached feeling. Every message had the same tone. They weren't shocked by what they'd actually done to me. They were shocked that I'd stopped going along with it. At 12:03 in the morning, my phone started lighting up like a crime scene under investigation. Calls, text messages, voicemails piling up. The panic had truly started now. Turn the utilities back on, Patricia was shouting in one voicemail, her voice cracking apart. We'll sort this out tomorrow. But tomorrow had already arrived, and now they were the ones sitting in darkness. Emily's email appeared on my screen seconds later. Perfect. Forward everything to me. We're filing a formal demand letter by end of business tomorrow. I copied everything over to her, then closed my laptop. My hands weren't shaking. This wasn't cruelty. It was simply necessary. My compassion had been a luxury account they'd been overdrafting for years. I poured myself a glass of water, noticing my hands were steady for the first time in months. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accounting. Before I logged off for the night, I opened one final browser tab. The property deed. Their house, the one they loved to brag about finally owning outright, was still legally under my name. I'd never gotten around to transferring the title, partly out of caution, partly out of some instinct I couldn't name. Now that instinct had become power. By dawn, Emily had sent me the first draft of the legal notice for review. She ended it with a single line that made me actually smile. They said you were out of the family. Let's make that official. Outside my window, the streetlights were flickering off as morning light broke through. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, one made of facts and numbers and quiet retribution. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel small or forgotten or invisible. I felt precise. The morning those legal letters went out, the world outside looked completely normal. Coffee shops opening their doors, traffic flowing steadily, sunlight slowly crawling up my window blinds. But inside my apartment, it felt like sitting in a courtroom waiting for the jury to return. Emily had sent the complete demand package to each of them through certified mail and email. Every receipt attached, every dollar amount listed, every signature included as evidence. At 9:12 that morning, my phone buzzed with a call. It was Richard, which was unusual because he never called first. "Sweetheart," he started with that rehearsed gentleness coating every single syllable. "This whole situation is getting completely out of hand. We should keep this private, just between family." I let the silence stretch out until I could hear him starting to falter. "It is private," I said finally. "It's just finally documented now." He took a sharp breath in. "You're making your mother physically sick with stress." "No," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "She made herself sick. I just stopped paying for the medication." Then I hung up. By noon that day, Patricia's post appeared on Facebook. It was a wall of self-pity wrapped up in Bible verses. We raised her with nothing but love, and now she's turned against her own family over money. Pride always comes before destruction. Underneath, my Aunt Gina commented first, "Disgusting behavior. I'd be completely ashamed." But then, for the first time in years, other names started appearing in the thread. Cousins, uncles, people I barely ever spoke to anymore. Wait a second, didn't she cover your house payment after that foreclosure? Isn't she the one who paid all that tuition? The comment thread began splitting wide open. Their carefully crafted story was cracking apart. At 1:46 that afternoon, an email arrived from Emily with the subject line, Additional Discovery. Attached was a PDF file containing screenshots, bank records, official statements. Emily's note read, confirming inheritance withdrawal of $40,000, signature mismatch detected, forgery highly likely. I read through it 3 separate times. The kitchen remodel, the new marble countertops. The timeline matched up perfectly. My mother, Patricia, hadn't just drained money from my bank account over the years. She'd actually stolen my grandmother's trust fund and forged my signature to do it. By that evening, Emily had already filed an emergency injunction. The court froze all their assets before they'd even sat down to dinner. That night, my parents tried reaching me through every possible channel. Emails, text messages, voicemails, all of them looping through the same desperate refrain. It was just a misunderstanding. We'll pay you back everything. Please, don't destroy the family. The irony of that last part actually made me laugh out loud. At 8:32 that evening, my apartment buzzer rang. Through the peephole, I could see my mother standing there, her eyes bloodshot red, clutching a white envelope in her hands. "Maddie," she whispered through the door, "please, we're about to lose everything. Do something for your sister." "For Brianna," I asked her. Her lips started trembling. "She's still your sister, isn't she?" I opened the door just wide enough to hand her a paper that had already been waiting on my table. It was a copy of the eviction notice Emily had filed that very morning. "You'll receive the official copy in 7 days," I told her calmly. Her face completely drained of color. "You wouldn't actually do this." "I already did," I said. She stared at me then, searching desperately for the old version of her daughter. The one who fixed everything, forgave everything, funded everything. That version didn't exist anymore. "Goodbye, Mom," I said clearly and closed the door. I didn't stand there watching her leave. I just stood in the quiet apartment, breathing in what felt like the end of an entire era. By the next afternoon, chaos was unfolding exactly like clockwork. The utility companies disconnected service. The mortgage notice hit their email inbox. Emily forwarded me confirmation after confirmation. Title secured, eviction approved, probate court has been notified. Then came another storm, this time online. Patricia posted again. "She's actually suing her own parents. We're absolutely heartbroken." But this time, the replies weren't sympathetic at all. Aunt Meredith, who was always quiet and factual, typed just one single line. "You mean the mistake where you forged her signature on legal documents?" The comment thread went completely silent after that. Hours later, my phone buzzed again with an unknown number, a New York area code. "This is Amy Patel calling from the Patterson and Lowe probate office," the voice said professionally. "We're currently handling your late grandmother's estate. We've discovered some major discrepancies in the beneficiary documentation." I gripped the kitchen counter. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Yes, Miss Foster, it appears your name was crossed out and replaced with someone else's. The signature doesn't match your verified records. The kitchen remodel, those expensive marble counters, every single puzzle piece suddenly slid into perfect place." "Thank you so much," I said. "Please send everything directly to my attorney." By midnight, Emily had confirmed the new filing. Inheritance fraud, criminal investigation recommended. Another freeze. Another layer of truth being revealed. In the days that followed, the real story spread quietly through the extended family network. One by one, relatives started reaching out to me, cousins I hadn't heard from in years. "They borrowed money from us too," one wrote. "They never paid anyone back ever. You're not crazy, Madison." Every message felt like a small rescue boat appearing in a flood I'd been drowning in for years. When the official court notice finally arrived by certified mail, Emily called me immediately. "They're going to try contacting you again," she warned. "Don't engage with them at all, even if they apologize." She paused meaningfully. "Especially if they apologize." The next morning, my inbox exploded all over again. Patricia's new strategy was remorse. "We forgive you for all of this. Please forgive us too." Forgiveness being used as leverage. the oldest manipulation trick in existence. I forwarded that email directly to Emily and archived the entire thread without responding. By the end of that week, the house was no longer theirs legally. The deed, still under my name, transferred to a buyer within just days. Emily wired the proceeds directly into my account. Watching that confirmation line appear on my bank statement felt nothing at all like revenge. It felt like balance finally being restored. Brianna tried reaching out one final time with a text message. "You won." I typed back quickly. "Nobody wins when family becomes debt." Then I muted her number permanently. That night, the city outside my window flickered steadily, completely indifferent to everything happening. I sat by that same window, the one that had once reflected every sleepless night I'd spent trying to save them. Now it reflected something entirely new. Me, alone, but finally unburdened. Somewhere out there in that city, they were learning how to actually live without me for the first time. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel even a trace of guilt for letting them figure it out. By the time the court system finalized everything officially, several weeks had passed in this strange, quiet rhythm I'd never experienced before. Emily sent me a brief email. "Case completely resolved. Repayment agreement has been signed. Probate reversed and corrected. You're clear." Clear. That word felt almost foreign to me. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their house had been sold. Their debts were legally tied to their own names for once in their lives. The silence that used to haunt me at night had somehow transformed into peace. I no longer woke up to emergency phone calls or requests for just one more favor. My mornings belonged to me again. I bought myself a small apartment downtown. Nothing grand or fancy, just clean walls, natural sunlight, and absolutely no ghosts from the past. Connor helped me move all my things in. He didn't say much that day, just handed me a cup of coffee and smiled like he understood exactly what freedom tasted like. The first night in that new place, I opened my old spreadsheet one final time, the one where I'd meticulously tracked every single dollar I'd ever spent on them. I stared at those numbers for a long time, then moved my cursor and hit delete. Watching it vanish from my screen didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. Word eventually got around through the family that my parents were now renting a small house on the outskirts of the city. Brianna was apparently working part-time somewhere she absolutely hated. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that news, just distance. They were finally living the life they'd actually built, without me holding up the structure anymore. That night, for the first time in years, I slept straight through until morning. No guilt keeping me awake, no noise in my head, just the steady, quiet hum of a life that finally belonged to me and nobody else. About a month later, I went to visit my grandmother's grave. I laid down fresh tulips, which had always been her favorite flowers, and whispered quietly, "It's done now." The wind that moved through the cemetery felt like an answer coming back to me. Peace isn't something loud. It's quiet, it's steady, and it's earned. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who broke you, you already know this truth. You're not alone in that experience, and you're not cruel for choosing peace over chaos. If this story resonated with you in any way, check out the Family Betrayal playlist for more true stories just like mine. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next.
Her perfume still hung in the air, expensive and cloying, as she wheeled her Louis Vuitton suitcase toward the security gates. She didn't even glance back at me. 15 years old, one small duffel bag clutched to my chest, tears barely contained. She stopped only once, to adjust her sunglasses and toss a last, casual dagger at me. "You'll figure out." That was it. No hug, no plan, no goodbye. My name is Madison, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been left behind by the person who was supposed to love you the most? I stood frozen, the chatter of the airport swallowing me. Happy families streamed past, hugging, laughing, while my mother walked off with her new husband and his two perfect children. A new family. Her family. I was nothing more than baggage. She didn't want to pay to check. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I had $47. No ticket home. No plan. For a minute, I thought I might faint. Then I remembered a name I'd buried for years, a name my mother spit like poison every time she talked about him. My father. She told me he was worthless, that he'd abandoned us, that he'd never wanted me. But in that moment, standing alone in a departure terminal that smelled like coffee and stale air, I needed to take that chance. I found the number in an old message thread, hands trembling as I dialed. It rang once, twice. Then a deep, steady voice answered. Madison? My knees nearly gave out. Dad, I choked, tears breaking free. Please help me. There was a pause. Just breathing. Then a calm I'd never heard before. Tell me exactly where you are. I'm on my way. Hours later, as dusk bled into the airport windows, I heard a roar outside, and people rushing to the glass in awe. A sleek private jet, engines humming like a predator, landed on the small runway. And then he stepped out. Tall, dark suit, eyes that matched mine so perfectly it hurt. He opened his arms. Madison, he called, voice breaking. I ran. I ran into a father's hug I hadn't felt in a decade, warm and safe and unshakable. And in that moment I knew the woman who abandoned me had no idea what kind of storm she'd just created. The jet cabin was so quiet I could hear my own breath, still ragged from crying. My father sat across from me, watching with a gaze that felt like both a question and a promise. You're safe now, he said, voice steady, grounded. Safe. That word nearly made me collapse all over again. I tried to gather myself, wiping tears with the back of my hand. She just left me, I whispered, like I was nothing. His jaw clenched, a dangerous flash in his eyes. She always was selfish, he said low. But this? Abandoning you in an airport? That I will not forgive. We took off, the private jet gliding through the night like something out of a dream. I felt a wild, dizzying relief. No cramped seats, no crying in a public bathroom, no apologizing to strangers for existing. My father leaned forward. You're coming home with me, Madison. For good. Home. That word felt so foreign on my tongue. I don't have anything, I said, my voice cracking. He smiled, heartbreak softening the sharp lines of his face. You have me. The tears started again, unstoppable this time. We landed a few hours later at a private hangar surrounded by sleek cars and security guards who nodded respectfully at my father. As he led me down the steps of the jet, I realized he was someone powerful, someone who had waited all this time for a reason to fight. He guided me to a waiting SUV, the smell of leather and cedar wrapping around me like safety. Madison, he said gently once the doors closed, we're going to make this right. But on our terms. My mind flashed to my mother's cold smile, her hand around her new husband's arm, walking off without a shred of guilt. What about her? I asked, voice tiny but trembling with something stronger than fear, rage. My father's expression turned lethal. Don't worry, he said. When she gets back, she'll learn exactly what it means to abandon her own blood. I sat back against the seat, the tears finally stopping, my heart beginning to heal in tiny, fragile beats. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. And when she returned from her precious vacation, she was going to find out what it felt like to be left with nothing. The days that followed felt like stepping into another world, a world my mother had sworn didn't exist. My father's house was all stone and glass perched high above the city, a view so powerful it made me feel like I could see my whole life laid out below. There were staff who called me miss, who smiled without pity. A soft bed, warm food, people who asked what I needed instead of what I could give them. My father stayed close, never pushing, never scolding. Just there, strong and protective in a way I hadn't dared to hope a parent could be. One night, I sat on the balcony wrapped in a thick blanket, looking over the city lights, my father beside me. You deserve better, he said, voice soft but certain. My throat felt tight. She made me believe you hated me, I confessed. He went still, shoulders tense. I never stopped wanting you. She kept you from me. The pain in those words made my heart twist. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head fiercely.
No, Madison.
Never apologized for being taken from me. And then, as if he could sense the weight building in my chest, he reached for my hand. She won't get away with this. A shiver ran down my spine. What do you mean? He let a dark, satisfied smile curve across his mouth. Her new husband's a real estate investor, right? And that beautiful vacation she's enjoying?
He paused.
She paid for it with funds that aren't legally hers. I froze. He looked at me with a kind of careful pride. I hired a legal team. When she steps back into that house, she'll find it locked with an eviction notice taped to the door. Frozen accounts. No place to run. My heart thudded so hard I felt dizzy. You'd really do that? For leaving you like garbage in a terminal? His eyes hardened. I'd do worse. I leaned into his side, a tiny spark of safety blooming in my chest. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Because my father wasn't just rescuing me.
He was avenging me.
2 weeks later, it finally happened. I woke up to the buzz of my father's phone lighting up the nightstand. He glanced at the screen, then handed it to me without a word. It was my mother. Her voice was thin and strangled when I answered. Madison? Where are you? I could hear chaos behind her. The echo of an empty house, the panic twisting every syllable. I swallowed, steadying myself. I'm with Dad, I said simply. She sucked in a sharp breath. With him? After everything? I smiled, letting her words roll right off me. You mean after you abandoned me in an airport? That was a misunderstanding, she snapped, desperation leaking through her polished tone. I thought you could manage. I laughed, a sound so raw and sharp it surprised even me. At 15? Alone. Silence. I came back and everything was gone, she whispered. The locks, the money. My father was watching me, calm and proud, a steady anchor. You should have thought of that, I told her, voice like ice. You walked away from me. This is my house, she screamed, her composure finally breaking. No, I said, letting each word cut deep. It was his house. And you lost it. She went silent again, broken, furious, trapped. You can come back, she tried one last time. We'll figure it out. I looked at my father, at the peaceful calm around us, at a world where I was wanted, and felt the answer settle in my bones. No, I said softly. I'm not coming back. And then I ended the call. My father reached out, squeezing my shoulder gently. Proud of you, he said. Tears stung my eyes, but they were warm this time, not cold and helpless like before. She'll be fine, he told me, voice calm. She has to learn what being alone really feels like. I nodded, breathing easier. For the first time, I wasn't the abandoned child. I was the girl who walked away, on her own terms. The days after that call felt like walking through a new sunrise. No more waking up wondering if I was wanted. No more clutching an empty phone in the dark. I began to settle into my father's world, piece by piece. A private tutor came to help me catch up with school. I got to choose my own clothes instead of wearing hand-me-downs, felt what it meant to eat without apologizing for being hungry. My father gave me space when I needed it, and held me steady when the old fears crept back in. One afternoon, I found him in his office, a quiet storm behind his desk. Papers spread across polished mahogany, legal documents and reports. Dad, I said carefully, what happens to her now? He looked up, eyes thoughtful but unshaken. Her accounts are frozen. The house is ours again. She has no way to touch your trust fund. The lawyers are making sure of that. A strange relief flooded me. She might hate me for this. I admit it, a tiny thread of guilt winding through my chest. He pushed back from his chair and came around to face me, hands gentle on my shoulders. Madison, he said, voice heavy but certain. You cannot carry the guilt for her choices. She left you, not the other way around. A tear slipped free, but I let it fall. She was supposed to be my mom, I whispered. He nodded, grief flashing in his own eyes. She was supposed to protect you. She didn't. I will. A calm strength spread through me. I realized then that love could be fierce and gentle at once, and that someone could fight for me without making me feel small. Later that night, I lay in my new room, warm and safe, no shadows in the corners. I scrolled through old photos on my phone, pictures of birthdays where my mother smiled too wide, parties where I stood off to the side. I deleted them one by one, and when I finally put the phone down, I felt a weight lift that had been chained to me for years. My life didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to me. A week later, a letter arrived, official, cold, stamped with legal threats. My mother's name scrawled across the bottom, dripping with false outrage. She was contesting the eviction, claiming emotional harm, claiming I'd been brainwashed. I almost laughed reading it. My father sat calmly across from me, skimming the pages, unbothered. "This is desperation," he said flatly. "She has nothing." I exhaled, relief mixing with a strange ache. Why won't she just let go? His eyes were steady, unshakable. Because she's losing power. And people like her don't know how to live without it. The lawyers were swift, sharp, methodical. Within 2 days, they had shut down every claim she'd tried to make, leaving her letters nothing more than worthless threats. When I came down to breakfast the next morning, Dad was reading the news on his tablet, a small, satisfied grin on his face. "It's over," he told me. "Legally and financially. She can't touch you. Ever again." The quiet around me felt impossibly huge, like stepping into a cathedral of freedom. I sat down across from him, spoon stirring cereal that suddenly tasted better than any luxury meal I'd ever had. "Thank you," I whispered. His gaze softened.
No, Madison.
"Thank you for surviving, for trusting me to bring you home." I swallowed hard, emotion catching in my throat. He reached for my hand across the table, steady and strong. "You're safe now," he repeated like a vow. That night, I stood on the balcony, looking at the city sparkling below, and thought about her. My mother, sitting somewhere alone, the walls closing in on her, learning what abandonment really felt like. And somehow I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. Because I hadn't ruined her. She had done that all by herself. And now, I was free to build something better, something that could never be torn apart by anyone's selfishness again. Spring crept in quietly, soft breezes replacing the sharp winter air. I'd started classes again, this time at a school that actually cared about my future. My father made sure I had the best teachers, the best counselors, the best chance. Slowly, I learned how to laugh without flinching. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for my phone, expecting a cruel text from my mother, but then remembered she couldn't reach me anymore. That realization felt like a second heartbeat, steady and strong. One afternoon, after class, I walked into my father's office to find him on the phone, calm as ever. "Yes," he was saying, "she has no legal claim and she knows it. Let her scream." He saw me in the doorway and ended the call with a quiet, final click. "She's trying again?" I asked, a small spark of old fear stirring. He nodded, but a smile played on his lips. "Letters. Useless threats. Nothing that can touch you." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "She doesn't get to own you anymore, Madison," he reminded me gently. "Not your heart. Not your story." I stepped closer, hugging him tight, burying my face against the familiar scent of cedar and something safe. "Thank you," I whispered again. He pulled back, eyes warm. "You did this, you know. You survived. I'm just giving you the place you always deserved." His words sank deep, planting something powerful inside me. That night, I dreamed of her, my mother, standing at the airport, her designer suitcase in hand, but no one left to abandon. I woke up feeling light, untethered. I was no longer the girl she'd left behind. I was the girl who had rebuilt herself. The girl who had chosen love, real love, over her mother's shallow, rotting version of it. And that truth was worth more than any revenge could ever be. The morning was warm, sunlight spilling over the marble floors like forgiveness. I stood by my bedroom window, looking out at the life I'd built piece by piece, far from the poison she'd left me drowning in. My father tapped on the door, smiling. "Ready?" I nodded, slipping on my jacket, calm and sure. Today was the court hearing, the final chance my mother had to twist the story. But there was no fear left in me, only certainty. We drove together, silent, the quiet between us filled with an unspoken strength. When I stepped into the courthouse, I saw her sitting on a bench, alone, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No perfect husband, no shiny kids, just a woman who'd burned everything down around herself. Our eyes met. Something in her face cracked. "Madison," she said, voice brittle. "We can still fix this." I held up a hand, steady. "No," I told her, letting every bit of calm pour through me. "I'm done." Her mouth fell open, but the bailiff was already calling my name, already confirming what my father's lawyers had proven. She had no rights to my trust, no rights to me, no rights at all. She tried to follow me out of the courtroom, but security stopped her. I looked back once, saw her reaching for me, and felt nothing. No hate, no pain, nothing. Because she was a ghost now. Back in the car, my father squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" I took a deep breath, letting it fill every corner of me. Clean and bright. "Free," I said. He smiled, pride and love shining so clear it almost hurt. "Then that's all that matters." As we pulled away, I looked out at the world rolling past the window. Wide, open, waiting for me. I wasn't the girl left at an airport anymore. I was the girl who found a way home. And this time, no one could take that away from me. He looked me dead in the eyes that morning, leaning back in his leather chair like a king guarding his throne. "We don't hire losers like you," he spat, voice dripping with contempt. His grin was so confident, so certain it almost made me laugh. Almost. "My name is Natalie. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever had someone bury you alive in their low expectations?" I stood there, holding my resume, trying to keep my hands steady. I'd worn my best navy suit, tried to hide the years of disappointment stitched into my skin. I'd practiced every answer, every greeting, all to stand in front of a man who already decided I was worthless before I spoke. "My brother-in-law." He leaned forward, savoring every word. "I'm protecting the company, Natalie. We can't have embarrassments ruining our image." I nodded once, calm as glass. "I understand perfectly." He laughed, waving me off like a beggar at his gate. "Good. Now, get out of my office." So I did. I walked out, my heartbeat rattling against my ribs, shame trying to drown me. But underneath that shame, something else pulsed. A cold, bright rage I hadn't felt in years. He thought he could bury me with those words. He thought he could carve failure into my bones and I'd accept it. He didn't know I'd been preparing for this moment for months. That I'd had my own interviews, my own contracts, my own silent, vicious climb waiting behind closed doors. That night, I barely slept. The city buzzed beyond my window, neon lights smearing against the glass like war paint. Tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, he arrived at the same gleaming building, swaggering through the lobby in his $1,000 suit, ready to crush someone else's dreams. But the receptionist rose from her desk, voice tight with nerves. "Sir, the new Director General would like to see you immediately." He frowned, confused. "Director General? We don't have a—" And then he saw me, standing in the glass office above him, watching through the window. My name etched on the door in bold letters. Director General. His face turned a shade I'd never seen before, somewhere between disbelief and pure, raw terror. And in that single, perfect second, I felt every insult he'd ever thrown at me burn to ash. He stormed up the marble stairs, each step echoing like a funeral bell. His face was a perfect mask of disbelief and panic, cracking around the edges as he tried to hold on to the illusion of control. I stood behind the director's desk, my desk, calm and unshaken, letting the silence swallow him whole. "Natalie," he choked, voice brittle. "What the hell is this?" I rested my hands lightly on the polished wood. "Sit," I said. He hesitated, thrown by how steady I sounded, how completely unafraid I looked. I said, "Sit." He dropped into the chair, the same one I'd occupied as a trembling applicant only a day ago. His eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline. None came. I took a slow breath, letting every second stretch out, letting him taste the humiliation I'd carried for years. Yesterday, I began. You told me losers had no place here. He swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. Well, I continued, measured and sharp. You were half right. Losers don't belong here. He tried to cut in, to salvage even a shred of power. You can't. I raised my hand, silencing him with a look so cold it could have shattered glass. From this moment on, I said, each word slicing him open, I'm in charge. You answer to me. Every report, every approval, every deal comes across this desk. He gaped at me, his mouth working, no words forming. And let me make one thing very clear, I added, leaning in so he could see the steel in my eyes. You will never speak to me the way you did yesterday. Not here, not ever. The muscles in his jaw twitched, like he wanted to argue but knew there was nothing left to say. I straightened, letting the moment settle, letting him drown in the truth. You don't get to decide my worth anymore, I told him, voice steady. I do. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. My new assistant peeked in, respectful, eyes trained on me, not him. Director General, she said, with a reverence that made my brother-in-law flinch, the board is ready for your briefing. I nodded. Tell them I'll be there in 5. She closed the door, leaving me alone with the man who once tried to crush me. I let a small, lethal smile slip across my lips. Welcome to the new hierarchy, I told him. Try to keep up. And then I left him sitting there, drowning in the power he once thought was his alone. I stepped into the boardroom with my head held high, every inch of me radiating the authority I had earned in silence. The directors stood, a sea of polished suits and cautious smiles, greeting me with respect that tasted like victory on my tongue. Director General, one of them said, nodding. We're honored to have you. Honored. How many times had I starved for that word? I took my seat at the head of the table, my place now, and let the hush settle. My brother-in-law slipped in behind me, trying to blend into the shadows, but the directors noticed him right away. Mr. Hawthorne, one of them said stiffly, you can take the back row. He froze, swallowing humiliation so bitter I could practically smell it. But he obeyed, sinking into a chair at the edge of the room like a child sent to detention. I launched into the strategy I'd spent months building, pouring my heart into each slide, each word, each plan. There was no stammering, no shrinking, just the quiet, unstoppable truth of who I had become. They listened, eyes sharp, heads nodding, taking notes, asking questions. Not one of them called me a fraud. Not one of them laughed. Halfway through, I caught my brother-in-law's expression, a perfect mix of awe, fear, and disbelief. It was everything I'd fought for, everything I'd bled for in a world that tried to chain me to the floor. I kept going, voice even, breath steady. By the end of the presentation, the entire board broke into applause. It hit me like a warm wave, the recognition I'd been starved of for so long. Brilliant work, one director said. This company is in strong hands. Strong hands.
Mine.
I gathered my notes, meeting their eyes one by one. Thank you, I said, calm and unbowed. From this moment on, there will be no tolerance for arrogance, for dismissing talent, or for disrespect. This company will run on merit and merit alone. A chorus of agreement echoed around the table. My brother-in-law's head hung low, shoulders collapsed, no witty retorts left. As the board members filed out, one paused to whisper, "We've needed someone like you for a long time." I let that sink in. Someone like me. I turned, letting my brother-in-law see every inch of my triumph. "Any questions, Mr. Hawthorne?" asked cool and clear. He shook his head, broken, defeated. "Good," I said softly. "Then get to work. Because this was my empire now. And no one would ever call me a loser again." The boardroom emptied, leaving behind only a faint echo of applause and the scent of burnt coffee. My brother-in-law lingered by the window, shoulders hunched, staring out over the city, like a man trying to find an escape route. I walked toward him, heels tapping against the marble with a rhythm that felt like a war drum. He turned, eyes bloodshot, pride leaking out of him in slow, painful drips. "Natalie," he rasped, "you don't have to do this." I tilted my head, studying him the same way he had studied me, like I was something worthless. "Do what?" "Humiliate me," he pleaded. "We're family, family." The word was poison on his lips. "You humiliated me first," I reminded him, voice as calm as glass. "You made sure I felt smaller than dirt in front of everyone. And now you want forgiveness." He swallowed hard, lips trembling. I didn't know you were qualified," he stammered, looking at the floor. I almost laughed. "Qualified? I was qualified before you ever sat in that chair," I said. "But you couldn't see past your own arrogance." His hands shook.
Please.
"Give me another chance." A part of me wanted to spit back every cruel word he'd ever thrown at me. But another part, the stronger part, decided something worse, to make him earn it. "You'll stay," I said, my voice cutting through the stale air. "And you'll work harder than you ever have in your life.
You will answer to me.
You will respect every employee here. And if I hear even a whisper that you've stepped out of line, you're done. Do you understand?" He nodded, barely breathing. "Say it," I demanded. His voice cracked. "I understand." I let a thin smile play across my lips, the taste of power sweet on my tongue. "Good," I said. "Because I won't let you destroy anyone the way you tried to destroy me." For a second, I saw him. Not the bully, not the gatekeeper, but a man who'd built his entire identity on belittling others, now crumbling under the weight of someone stronger. I turned away, not giving him another moment of my energy. My phone buzzed with a new email, contracts, partnerships, opportunities. The world was finally opening its doors to me, no longer blocked by his arrogance. As I walked out of the boardroom, I felt the future roll out before me like a red carpet. No more begging. No more shrinking. No more waiting for permission to shine.
I was here to stay.
The next few days moved like a tidal wave, powerful, unstoppable, cleansing every stain my brother-in-law had left behind. I tore through outdated policies, launched new programs, gave chances to people who had been overlooked just like I had. Every decision I made rippled through the building, changing its heartbeat. Employees started smiling at me in the halls, their shoulders lighter, their voices steadier. Word traveled fast. There was a new director general, and she didn't tolerate bullies. My brother-in-law tried to keep his head down, tried to fade into the crowd, but it was too late. The staff remembered how he'd sneered, how he'd mocked people, how he'd shut doors that should have been open. Now, every report he handed me shook in his trembling hands. I reviewed his work, steady and professional. No cruelty in my voice, but no softness, either. "Mr. Hawthorne," I said one afternoon, "you forgot to include the projected figures for next quarter." He swallowed, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "I'll fix it," he mumbled. "Yes," I replied calmly, "you will." The power shift was so complete, even the walls felt different. One day, as I left for a meeting, I noticed the interns chatting in a sunlit corridor, their voices no longer hushed with fear. They were laughing, hopeful. I paused to listen, realizing they were talking about their dreams, their projects, their wild ambitions. And no one was mocking them for it. That moment filled me with something I couldn't name, a kind of hard-won peace that settled deep in my bones. When I got back to my office, Logan, my assistant, handed me a stack of letters. "Messages of support," he explained. "People are grateful for what you're doing." I ran my fingers over the envelopes, stunned. For so long, I'd been the outsider, the nobody, the loser. And now I was the reason people dared to believe again. That night, alone in my penthouse, I stared out at the city, lights shimmering like tiny fires. I promised myself I would protect what I had built, not just for me, but for every voice that had ever been silenced. Tomorrow, I would stand taller. Tomorrow, I would remind him, and everyone else, that my reign wasn't an accident. It was earned, line by line, scar by scar, until there was nothing left to doubt. The following week, I called an all-hands meeting in the atrium, a space that used to feel cold and corporate but now pulsed with something electric. The employees gathered in cautious silence, their eyes trained on me with a mixture of hope and fear. I stepped up to the microphone, the bright lights cutting across my face, and took a deep, calm breath. "My name is Natalie Hawthorne," I began, my voice steady as iron, "and I am the Director General of this company. From today forward, no one here will be made to feel like they don't belong." A ripple moved through the room. Surprise, relief, maybe even a little pride. I scanned the crowd, letting their faces imprint on my memory. "If you have an idea," I continued, "I want to hear it. If you have a dream, I want to help you build it. This place will reward your courage, not punish it." Somewhere near the back, my brother-in-law stood stiff and gray, shrinking behind the interns he once belittled. I let my eyes land on him, only for a heartbeat, just long enough for him to remember exactly who was in control. The applause started soft, almost shy, then grew until it was a thunderclap. I let it wash over me, the sound of an empire reborn. After the meeting, people came up one by one, shaking my hand, thanking me, telling me about the nightmares they'd survived under the old regime. Each story carved itself into my bones, reminding me why I had fought so hard to get here. Later that afternoon, I returned to my office, the sun pouring through the tall glass like a blessing. My brother-in-law hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "May I come in?" he asked, voice small. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat, wringing his hands. "Natalie," he whispered, I'm trying to change." I studied him, seeing for the first time not a monster, but a man built on rotten pride, crushed by his own making. "Change takes time," I said, "and you will be accountable every single day." He nodded, shame thick in the air. I leaned forward, steady. "You built walls. I'm tearing them down. If you want to stay, you help me do it." His eyes filled with something that looked like regret. "Okay," he agreed. I dismissed him gently, a part of me almost, feeling sorry for how thoroughly the world had flipped on him. As the door clicked shut behind him, I looked around my office, my empire, and let a quiet, dangerous smile bloom across my face. This was only the beginning, and they hadn't seen anything yet. The weeks rolled forward, each day carving new victories into the marble of that building. I signed contracts my brother-in-law had never been bold enough to dream of, brought in partners who valued integrity, and crushed every whisper of corruption that still clung to the corners. I could feel the culture shifting. Employees who used to avoid eye contact now stood taller, their voices steadier, their creativity on fire. The heartbeat of the company changed, and with it, my own sense of belonging finally felt real. One morning, Logan came in with a report that nearly made me laugh. "He's thriving," he said carefully, handing me the numbers. My brother-in-law, the man who once tried to bury me, had become one of my strongest lieutenants, working tirelessly to prove he wasn't the villain anymore. "He's trying hard," Logan added, shrugging. I skimmed the report, finding no errors, no manipulations, just solid, consistent effort. It felt strange, seeing him transform under the same rules he'd once mocked. People can change, I thought, if they're forced to look in the mirror long enough. That afternoon, we had another board meeting. I stepped in, confident, commanding, the director general everyone had learned not to question. My brother-in-law sat at the side table, quiet, focused, no longer a tyrant, but a man reborn. I delivered quarterly results that shattered every ceiling, and the board rose to their feet in applause. I stood there, letting that thunderous praise fill every crack in me their cruelty had once created. As the meeting ended, my brother-in-law approached, looking awkward in a way that was almost human. "Natalie," he said, clearing his throat. I'm grateful." I held his gaze, steady. "For what?" "For not destroying me," he admitted. "You could have." I nodded. "Yes," I answered. "I could have." He lowered his eyes, the weight of that truth heavy on his shoulders. "But sometimes," I continued, "the best revenge is watching someone learn." He looked up at me, eyes shining with something close to respect. "I won't forget it," he promised. I believed him. Walking back to my office, I felt a peace I had never known, the kind that comes after you burn your worst fears to the ground and build something beautiful in their place. My reign wasn't built on crushing others. It was built on reminding them and reminding myself that power belongs to those who refuse to bow. And tomorrow I'd keep proving it. The last day of the quarter arrived with a bright sky and a city humming with possibilities. I stood at the giant window in my office, coffee warming my hands, and let myself feel the quiet pride thrumming through my bones. This empire was mine, built not by stepping on people, but by refusing to stay down when they tried to bury me. Logan stepped in, beaming. "Natalie, it's time. Time for the employee celebration, something no director general before me had ever even considered. I decided every single worker, from the mailroom to the board, deserved to be honored for helping rebuild this place from the ground up. We gathered in the same atrium where my brother-in-law once ruled with fear. It was different now. Balloons, food, laughter bouncing off the marble walls. People smiling without dread. I took the microphone, scanning the faces of every single person who made this victory possible. "I stand here today," I began, voice steady, "not as a miracle, but as proof that no label can define you except the one you give yourself." Applause broke out, genuine, powerful. My brother-in-law stood to the side, head bowed, clapping along with everyone else. Humbled.
Changed.
And I let him stay, not out of weakness, but out of power. I finished my speech with a promise. This company will never again be a place where you are told you are less. It will never again turn away talent because of prejudice or pride. We will be a place that listens, that grows, that believes. The applause roared louder, people hugging, wiping away tears. And in that moment, I knew I'd done more than get revenge. I'd rewritten the rules. Logan joined me on stage, grinning, eyes full of pride. "Director General," he teased, "your legacy is going to be hard to beat." I smiled, a quiet, unbreakable smile. "Let them try," I said, because every time they tried to put me in a box, I would break it. Every time they tried to drag me down, I would rise higher. This was my world now, a world I'd earned with every scar, every breath, every refusal to quit. And nothing would ever take it from me again.